I'd like to call the meeting to, what's the word? Into session. Thank you. Everyone rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for the men and women of our armed services and those we lost to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. The notice requirements of the Public Open Meetings Act of the State of New Jersey has been satisfied by the inclusion of the date, time, and place of this meeting in the notice of regular meetings adopted by this board on January 4th, 2021. Such schedule and notice of meetings is posted at the Municipal Building, the Mount Olive Library, the Board of Education offices in the 6 schools, was submitted to the Daily Record for publication on January 8th, 2021, and was filed with the Clerk of Mount Olive Township on January 5th, 2021. Roll call in.
Mrs. Cohen? Here. Dr. Gales?
Here.
Mr. Kemna?
Here.
Mrs. Ouimet? Here. Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Stevens? Mr. Strelacci? Mr. Zire?
Here.
Dr. Giordano?
Here. Motion to recess in confidential session. Dr. Gales.
I'd like to make a motion to recess into confidential session. Second.
Resolved that the board meet in confidential session for the purpose of discussing personnel, matters of attorney-client privilege, pending or anticipated litigation. Be it further resolved that matters discussed in confidential session be disclosed to the public when the reason for confidentiality no longer exists. Action will not be taken. We're in a closed session. We should be in about 20 minutes, no more than 30 minutes. We're going to meet. All set. Where's the superintendent? Where'd Rob go? Do we see the superintendent? No. It's all right, we can start with that. Motion to return from closed session? We are back in closed session. Thank you, everyone, for waiting. Approval of the minutes. Mr. Kemna.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes. Bear with me a second, it's not moving. Come on, baby. February 22nd, open and closed.
I'm sorry, who seconded
Bill
that?
second that.
Who did?
Bill. Mr. Robinson. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call in.
Mr. Kemna?
Yes.
Mrs. Ouimet? Yes. Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Zire?
Yes.
Mrs. Cohen?
Yes.
Dr. Gales?
Yes.
Dr. Giordano?
Yes. Communication petitions from the board?
None at this time.
From the superintendent?
Sorry, I jumped the gun. None at this time.
Okay. Seeing none? I know you're excited to get to 5.1, Dr. Zwicky. Superintendent's report, the floor is yours.
For my superintendent's report, we're going to have our executive director, Mrs. Schlier, who's going to report out on some of our universal screening data, our participation in the NJ-DOE pilot for the road forward, and next steps in our RTI program.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for letting me come here and report on how our students did in our last Linkit benchmark assessment. We're going to do a comparison between Form A and Form B. I know you received the full slide deck of 85 slides over the weekend from the C&T committee. This is a condensed version for you. Some points to consider when you're looking at the data that we have today in front of you. So when we're looking at students in grades K and 2, we're looking at students that scored at the 50% or higher on the Linkit assessments, which means they're at or above grade level. In grades 3 to 11, we're looking at students that are likely to meet or exceed the standards. And when you're looking at the percentage points differences, anything that is 3 to 3.5 percentage points, either higher or lower, is an indicator of progress or a slight decay in significance. So a t-test was run, and based on the results of that, looking at the means and the average scores, we determined that 3.0 to 3.5, anything higher or lower indicates a growth or a decline. As we move across Form A to Form B is a little more rigorous than Form A, so the cut scores are a little more challenging and more difficult for students. You're going to see some data in here that may be surprising for you from the secondary level, but I want all of us to keep in mind, and looking at this through the lens of what we have going on right now, which is data that was taken during a pandemic. We had lots of different circumstances for our students. Our elementary students, as you know, have been in session since September. Our secondary students went back and forth in and out of different cohorts. So we've got some data here to look at and keeping those things in consideration. Overall, Form A to Form B in elementary for ELA, we had some nice progress. We had increase in all of our areas aside from grade 3 and 5. Keep in mind, again, that's below the 3.0, so that really is kind of flat. There really wasn't much decrease in the scores. The students that took the assessments, we're comparing the students that took Form A with the same students that took Form B. So for example, in 3rd grade, if there's 320 students that took Form A, those same 320 students were compared with Form B. So the data is real. K-5 math, again, we had a nice increase in percentage points across the board, aside from grade 4. I noted here, as far as our overall impressions, the dip that we had in grade 4 was due to fractions are being taught in topic 8, and when the students took Form B in grade 4, they were only on topic 7. So we know that's an area that the students were not exposed to yet, which is why you saw that decrease in that area for grade 4. Looking into the middle schools, where we start to see a little bit more of that pandemic issues come into play with regards to how the students did overall. We did see a decrease in our percentage points for students in ELA, grades 6, 7, and 8 across the board. We saw a nice increase in percentage points for our students in math, 6th, 7th, and 8th. 7th, again, is at that 1 percentage point, so keep in mind, again, it's less than 3.0, so it's really not that different. So overall impressions, we did see, like I said, and the slide said a decrease for grade 6, Grade 7, we had students in grade 7, so from Form A, they were meeting and exceeding into bubble. Students that perform in bubble are likely to be proficient, but we saw in Form B, students went from those areas down to approaching, partial meeting, and need support. Math, again, we saw growth across all grades aside from grade 7, which was a very slight dip. Grade 6 math, we had a high increase of 15.5, and we had a shift up from students that were previously partially meeting through approaching a bubble. They moved into the meeting and exceeding categories. And overall, our students that showed the increase in math for the middle school from Form A to Form B, they were progressing as expected. Algebra 1 and 2 impressions. So we saw a slight decrease in Algebra 1 and 2 for our students. Again, the Algebra 2 is 3.1, so slightly above the 3.0. But overall, in the past years here in Mount Olive, we've always had 100% of our students in the middle school who took Algebra 2. They all met or exceeded standards on the New Jersey Learning Assessment for Math. So that's promising for us. Here's where, when you look at this slide, you look at the decrease in percentage points specifically for grade 11. So when we first took Lincoln a few years ago, when we brought Lincoln into the district, we were comparing ourselves against other students in the state of New Jersey. Because we've taken Lincoln over the years, we're now comparing our students' results against our own students. So a few years back, last year, our grade 11 students, or a year and a half ago, did so well on the assessment, it increased their percentage where the cut scores start. So for example, if you look at the last bullet point under ELA, ELA 11, in order to meet standards, students are starting at 69%, whereas grade 9, it's 58% means meeting, and then ELA is 10. So there's the difference, because ELA 11 has done historically so well in the past. This is where we saw that dip in grade 11 with regards to ELA. Algebra 1 and 2, we saw a nice increase across the board. The growth, the partially meeting more than doubled for students in Algebra 1. 31 students that were partially meeting, up to 76 students now. And Algebra 2 performance was similar to geometry, so that was a nice increase. So what are we going to do now that we know where our students are performing? We are going to continue with our RTI efforts across the board. Every school has an RTI team. We meet with them regularly, myself, Mr. Robinson, and Mr. Stansberry, the team, to discuss our concerns. We're going to continue to focus our WIN that's now implemented back again at the elementary schools to help support the students that fell below benchmark in ELA and math. We're going to continue to utilize our blended learning platforms to support our instruction. We have ST Math, Success Maker, Alex Math, Mayan, etc. Lexia is new this year. We're using it across the board. K5, when we originally brought it in, we were only keeping it at K12. We've had such feedback and progress positive for our elementary students that we've expanded across the board. We're going to continue to provide our progress monitoring with our students in MOSA and in grades K5 using Star Renaissance curriculum-based measures. So these are progress monitoring tools that we have. And we're going to continue to develop our personalized learning plans for our students that are at risk in the high school. Again, MOSA, we've added more students this year that we've invited. We've expanded. So we have MOSA now going down into the high school. Our session 3 will run March 30th till June 3rd. Families have the option for in-person or virtual. We've invited 416 students from elementary, 324 middle, and now we've got 40 at the high school. I believe you had notification in the C&T committee notes that right now we've uncovered that we have about 400 students in grades 6 to 12 that have grades that are failing. And so what we're going to do is parents are going to be notified, and their child is going to have an opportunity to make up the missed assignments, failing assessments, projects, etc., in order to change that grade up to a 70. So again, RTI for these students. And lastly, we've had an opportunity to pilot with the Department of Ed for the Road Forward, our spring assessment data collection pilot. So the purpose of this is for the Department of Ed to obtain where our students are to determine whether or not our students are met to meet grade level standards by the end of the school year. So we're working on right now uploading all of our ELA assessments from Linkit, our math assessments from Linkit, and we need to upload also Science K11. We're partnering with Linkit. We've met a few times over the last week and today. Mr. Stansberry, Mr. Robinson, myself, Mr. Jensen, and we're looking at developing and creating benchmarks that will be administered to kids upon return on March 22nd and March 23rd. And that is it. So I don't know if you have any questions that I can maybe answer for you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, which was a nice synopsis of the 80-plus page slides. You did a great job. My first question is about the issue of fractions that you mentioned.
Sure.
Because when I read the slides, I saw that in one of the slide presentations. And this is in reference to Rubicon. Prior to implementing Rubicon, we were talking about pushing fractions down to third grade. So I assume that hasn't happened yet.
No, fractions are still being taught in third grade, but
Okay.
as you move along from third to fourth grade, what you're expected to know with regards to fractions are different. We uncovered that there were 13 questions on Form B that were not yet taught because we were on topic 7. And so because we know what's coming up, we're not going to take that information and put it into another area to prepare our kids for Lincoln. We want a true indicator of where are our students, where are we now, and that's where the data landed with regards to fractions in fourth grade.
If I can
Okay.
add on to that, third
Oh,
grade
sure.
is when they're first exposed now to fractions. In fourth grade, it's mathematical functions with fractions, adding, subtracting, multiplication, division.
Okay. Now, one of the great things that I love about Atlas is that you can do standards audits.
Yep.
So are we auditing to see who's hitting
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
standards and then aligning that with?
Absolutely. So we've had some training this year with the Atlas team, with the secondary school team and the elementary, and also the instructional supervisors. Mr. Stansberry, Mr. Robinson, myself were part of that. And we showed all the instructional supervisors, the teams, and how they can do the standards alignment to identify, are we making sure that we're assessing all the standards that we say we're going to assess as we move throughout the year and as we go back and forth and look at our curriculum map. So it's an awesome tool. Atlas is great. It does that alignment for us. And it's really just looking at it and having the conversations with the team and to see what's missing and where we need to add on to. So yes, we do. It's great.
And how often does the audit occur?
So we just did it last marking period. And so it's ongoing with the team. So it's up to the grade level teams, the department heads, the instructional supervisors, the Mr. Stansberry, Mr. Robinson, when they meet with the teams, they go over the data to see where we are. So looking at RTI, we're going to be looking at our work also this summer and spending some more time in Atlas with regards to alignment. So it's easy. It's literally a click of a button.
Okay.
So it's great. So thank you.
And my last question is, it kind of falls back to something that was shared with us back in October.
Sure.
And the quote was that because of RTI, we are 30% higher in terms of learning loss as a result of analyzing benchmark data.
Yep.
Do you think that the data that's reflected in the slides are still aligned with what was shared with us in October?
So the information that was shared with in October was looking at students from Form C to Form A and then how
Okay.
we did in the beginning of the year. So a lot has happened since September to now. You know, unforeseen circumstances with families, with students, all due to the pandemic. So, I mean, I think this slide that we're seeing now, the dip in our academics for ELA and other areas across the board, is just a natural progression of what has happened over the last, honestly, 12 months. And so we're lucky enough in our district to have the RTI support of the board with our MOSA, and to have all these programs for kids and the blended learning platforms and bringing things in. You trust us to do our work with our kids, so it's fortunate that we're lucky enough to have this. So I think we're in a good place, and I know that we've got a proactive plan moving forward, and I have no doubt that we're going to be able to move the needle with our kids and see them start to make some gains as we get back to normalcy. So.
And I'll piggyback on that. So the quote was mine. So in C, when we did Form C in June, when you looked at the national data, there was 50% regression, and we were showing 80% proficiency. So since then, we've administered Form A and Form B. So it's apples to oranges. But if we were to still say that when you look at the current data, that kids are still at around that 50% regression, when you look at the data that we have, I think the largest deviation we have from where kids were last year would be secondary ELA in like that 14%. 14, and so that would be like one place, but that still would not take us down to 50%. When you look at the other, where there's small fluctuations, we're still kind of in that same ballpark. We don't have NJSLA this past year to help us recalibrate the cut scores, which is why it's normed against us. So I would say even with the worst that we're seeing, and the reason why we're presenting this is to have this honest conversation about why we're still promoting Mount Olive Success Academy and exactly where we're at, and we're fully transparent about our data. even in the worst deviation, we're nowhere near close to the 50% regression. But the pandemic did go on, and is still going on another 6 months behind that last data point. My one ask, I would say, to the whole community and to the board members, which I said in C&T, is when folks ask you, we got an invite to Mount Olive Success Academy, should we accept? Yes, please accept. Look at it like free tutoring. It's extra help from our certified teachers. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do as a community is that when kids are identified and they are provided those invitations, that we support parents in that decision to participate in Mount Olive Success Academy.
Great.
Any other questions, comments, board members?
I'm sorry, can I just close out? I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate your work. I know it's been tough during the pandemic, but I appreciate the work, and thank you for answering the questions. And I'll be the first one to say, parents, if you get the invitation to the Mount Olive Success Academy, please accept. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ouimet and then Mr. Zire.
Sure.
Mine is not as in-depth as Dr. Gale's question.
It's
Mine's
okay.
very simple. When you talk about the Success Academy, would you happen to know, like, what is the percentage of parents that actually take advantage of it?
So out of the 416 that we've invited, typically when we have such a high number like that, we've had in the past, 228 kids participated in the session 2. So we're inviting more students now than we did for session 2. So typically about 80% of the kids come.
And do you know, does anybody ever express, and just like what he had just said, Dr. Gale's just said about, do it, do they ever express why they're apprehensive? Is it just the stigma of going to it, or what? Or?
I think more often than not, when we speak to parents, it's more because they have activities after school for their kids. It's really, they want to, they wish they could do it all for their kids. So parents have an option, right? We offer it 3 days. Some parents have their kids come 1 day, some come all 3. So we're lucky to give them the option for the students. So the kids that come maybe 1 day, we try to put them in a class together so the teacher doesn't have so much disparity among different groups. But more often than not, it's really just personal for family issues that happen after school or before school.
Okay, that's great. That's great. It sounds like when you talk about the remediation, it sounds like the no-D policy, going back to what we had before of that safety net we were always worried
Right.
about once we implemented that back in 2010. It was nice to have that safety net. It seems to be the same kind of safety net that we're doing here. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Mr.
And
Zire.
I would concur with that, and the idea that in a pandemic, we shouldn't be failing kids because, and what's amazing is, and Lisa brought this up, when you look at the data, we have kids who exceed standards on their Lincoln benchmark, and they have all A's in ELA and math and science and social studies, but then they're failing health and PE or they're failing art because of late assessments. So there are kids who are clearly proficient, but because of what's going on in the pandemic, they're working jobs, they're taking care of family members, all those things are complicating the fact that they may be late on assignments and things like that. So the thing that we've said to the teachers is we don't want any kids failing because of compliance grading. And so we're offering these opportunities. But it's not only no D, it's that there should be no F in the pandemic because of things that are outside of a kid's control.
Mr. Zire.
Perfect segue. So you're going to, remediation is allowing the kids to get to 70%. Is that a threshold of 70%? Or are we actually going to allow them to go beyond that?
70 is the threshold where we're at.
All right, so we're not going to extend it? I mean, because learning is learning beyond if they're able to come back and complete this, and if they received a B, we're not going
Right.
to do that?
Well, I think that it's a case-by-case basis, taking a look at, I think we've put the message out there that we're going to be the threshold is at 70, so we have students that have missed, I'm just going to, eight assignments, for example, so to speak. And so they have an opportunity to remediate those.
Right.
But we're not going to jump their grade up to a B. I mean, we're going to just look at 70 and that's it.
All right, because I was just, to take Dr. Zawicki's example, you got someone that has straight A's, but they have in their related arts classes, they have F's. This kind of maybe affects their GPA across the board here, or their standing. So I was hoping that we could actually remediate to what grade they would have actually got.
So that's what we've put out there for now in the initial discussion.
Right.
Both the middle school and high school have assessment task forces that are looking at this exact issue. So I have a feeling it's going to move further, but we're putting that in the hands of the faculty. But in the spirit of being restorative, I do believe it's going to go in that direction.
All right, well, you put it in good hands, and thank you so much for the presentation.
Sure, you're welcome. All right.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Schleer.
No, great. Thank you so much for supporting RTI and everything. Appreciate it.
That concludes my report, Dr. President.
Thank you. Personnel Committee report, Ms. Cohen, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. The Personnel Committee met tonight before this meeting at 6 o'clock. Joining me were John Kemna, Bill Robinson, Kimberly Marcus, Rob Zawicki, and Mark Zittimer. We had a few Bunch of items on the agenda tonight. The first was, we have an online recruiting fair going on. Kimberly Marcus is actually running this, and we are looking to just get some people into the system, as well as, of course, filling any openings that we have in the district. So that is an ongoing recruiting activity, and again, Kimberly is managing it. So excited about that. We did have an item tonight, and we will be adding an agenda item to our list tonight, and I will read it, and then our attorney, Mark Zittimer, will discuss this a little bit later. It is going to be 8.13, resolved that the board hereby ratifies the suspension of MT effective March 1st, 2021, pending an investigation and until further notice. So we will get into that a little bit later. We are still working on our aides work hours, trying to figure out the structure that we want. We're going to watch the way we have updated the structure with respect to aides' hours and their work hours for the next few months, see how things go for this year, and then we'll make a recommendation for next year once we take it and evaluate how things went this year. We have some policies that we're going to be adding for teacher duties. There's a couple that we talked about. Right now, I guess there's no policy for teachers to respond to parents in a period of time, so we're going to add that as a policy. We're also going to add a policy at the high school for teachers to add grades to the grade book in a certain period of time after tests and other work is done and complete. And also, there will be a mandated policy for lesson plans. So those are things that the policy committee will take over, and we will all be updated on those as they are put into place. We did talk about the fact that there have been, I guess, 2 negotiations already with the Teamsters, beginning negotiations, and I guess there's an administrator meeting that is forthcoming. We talked about 3 different PD items, professional development items, 2 webinars, and a Black History professional development, something ongoing for Black History. And then the last item we talked about was accommodations and quarantines. We have 93% of our staff in the building right now, which is great, and we have 19 staff members on quarantine. So that was an update from Dr. Zawicki, and I believe that was about it. Anything I missed? Team? John, Bill?
Perfect.
Anything else? Nope. Okay.
Questions or comments from the board?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. G.
Two quick questions since they were brought up. The first one is the job fair. Is this the job fair initiative that came out of the Equity Task Force Subcommittee?
Correct, and also participation in there's multiple colleges having online job fairs right now that have just popped up in the last 10 days or so. Also, New Jersey Teaching Jobs is having an online job fair, so that action item is inclusive of probably about 20 different online career fairs right now.
Great, thank you. And then the action item that you just brought up, 7.12, the professional development
8.12,
activity.
Dr. G, 8.12.
8.12, yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry,
No, it's okay.
8.12, sorry.
No, it's okay.
The professional development for Black History Month,
Yes,
that took place on 2/21.
it did, yes. I have information on here.
Is there a reason why it's being put on the agenda for approval now?
I don't know. Let's see, it was on 2/12, right?
Yeah, so that was actually part of the pilot program that we did with the Black History Month thing, and that was an add-on, so that's
Yeah.
why it was put on. And it was a last-minute thing that there was the thing done for the teachers as well, so that's why.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Zire?
Sorry, what percentage did you say of the teachers were back in school?
Right about 92, 93%. I'm sorry, it was Cohen.
No, that's actually, when you say 92, 93, are those teachers teaching on premise, or are they teachers that are actually teaching virtual and considered on premises as well?
That's 92 to 93% are on campus.
On campus, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Curriculum and Technology Report, Mr. Stevens?
Thank you very much. We met on March 4th It was myself, Dr. Zawicki, Mr. Zire, and Mr. Gales. We spoke about the hackathon with an update. We had 12 students in 8 teams signed up for the hackathon. This year's theme was to learn something to help someone. Students were to think of a problem that they or someone else was having and think of an app or a website idea that involves a programming skill that they do not know yet and how to incorporate this into their project. One of the winners was one of our very own Mount Olive High School students, and I do apologize if I do not say the name correctly, Samit Sin. We also had an esports competition update. One of the games was Super Smash Mario Brothers on Nintendo Switch with 22 people signing up. The number 1 winner was Joey Faustino of Mount Olive, and number 2 winner was Brandon Morrow of Mount Olive as well. Another one of the games was Overwatch on PC with 17 people signing up. Number 1 winner was Arian Singh of Mount Olive, as well as number 3 winner was Joseph Famai and Amelia Afano, both of Mount Olive students. Another update was on the Mount Olive Success Academy Session 3. Invites were sent out for Session 3 that will run from March 30th to June 3rd. Families have the option of in-person and virtual. 416 student invites were sent out to the elementary schools. 324 invites for students were sent out to the middle school, and 48 student invites were sent out to the high school. We've also, a lot of this will be repeating what Kimberly had spoke about. Not Kimberly, I'm sorry, Mrs. Sleer spoke about, with one of them being the identifying 400 students through 6 and 12 students. Will be given the opportunity to redo failing grades throughout the year. Parents will be notified of this through a letter for their opportunity for their students to redo these grades. Link it from kindergarten to 11th, Form A and B comparison. Slides were shared with the board just now as well, with the academic gains and learning loss from Form A to Form B in English Language Arts and Math using our district-wide benchmark assessments from Lincoln. Form C will be conducted at the end of May, beginning of June. Students that demonstrated a documented learning loss will be invited to the Mount Olive Success Academy Session 3 and will receive Tier 1 and 2 interventions and supports at each school. And finally, fingertip profile sample on March 26th. We will have all families will have an access to their child's fingertip profiles that highlight daily attendance data from September 6th to March 1st of 2021. Link it ELA and Math Form A to B result comparison in grades kindergarten to 11th and grades K through 12 Fundus and Pinel reading benchmark results. And that is the end of the report.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I'd just like to add a couple of things
Sure, Dr. J.
to the report. So I wanted to go back to the hackathon, and one of the things that the superintendent mentioned, which I think is very noteworthy, is that we had participation from local colleges and universities, CCM, Temple, and NGIT, who were there to, I guess, spot good talent, and I'm sure that that's going to work out well for many of our students. And we also talked about an exploratory committee on standards-based report cards in the upper grades. I thought that was noteworthy as well.
Super. Thank you. Anything else from other board members? Super. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Moving it right to Finance and Operations Committee report, Mr. Kemna.
Yeah, so we had our Finance and Operation meeting on Thursday, March 4th. In attendance was Dr. Zawicki, Mr. Miller, Ms. Libby. Unfortunately, Ms. Cohen and Ms. we met were unable to meet. It was a quick meeting, but a couple facility things. Around the state, they're looking at testing water for PFOA and PFOS, which are chemicals known for Teflon and also a firefighting product that goes in there. So Mr. Miller is going to do some testing for our wells, which is Sand Shore and Mount and the high school. Check the wells and do some testing for that, and then report back to us. We'll have that by April. Mr. Miller and his crew did a spectacular job keeping that dome up and down and up and down. We've had a number of instances with the storm. He's got it back up. We've got the insurance company involved here. They're going to replace a few panels in the cabling system. And thanks to his crew that did overtime and inflating it at midnight one night to make sure it got up before it got windy. So thank you on that. We were actually approached by West Morris, West Morris and Byram School District to do a joint transportation for athletics for the busing. So we're looking at that. We're going to see what it would take, what it would cost, and if it's feasible and if it makes sense for us to use our busing for those two school districts in a joint effort. We, looking at athletic branding and partnerships, we were approached by Adidas and Under Armour with two separate proposals. One's a little bit better than other, and I think we can do a little better there, but it would require our students to wear branded uniforms all in all, whether it's Adidas, Under Armour, or maybe Nike gets involved. So Dr. Zawicki's working on them and see what we can do with that. There's a couple action items here, budget transfers, just bring that to your attention. 10.1, it does seem like a lot of budget transfers. They had put a number of salaries in the wrong buckets, so that's to correct that. There's also some buildings and grounds overtime. A lot of that has to do with the dome that we had to transfer and kind of level that out. So there are some transfers there and some big numbers. CMS renovations in the project, 10.3. You'll see that remember we postponed that from last year with the pandemic. Bids came in a little bit less, so there's a recommendation there. And just 10.4, there's a disposal of bus. That might sound familiar. That was on, I think it was last month. The wrong VIN number was put down, so this is just to correct that. Any questions?
Any questions from the board members? Seeing none, moving right along. Policy and governance, Mr. Strachey was not able to attend, so it was myself, excuse me, Mr. Stevens, Dr. Zittimer, Dr. Zawicki, Ms. Schlier, and Ms. Marcus. A couple things that Dr. Zawicki and Ms. Cohen talked about, some of them. Dr. Zawicki is exploring, at this point, and will continue to explore and update the policy committee on a policy to require staff members to vaccine for COVID. Again, we're just exploring. It's in the preliminary stages of discussion. So he'll come back the next policy meeting with that. Committee did listen to Mr. Zittimer, discussed random drug testing for incoming staff. It would be new hired staff from July 1, 2021 moving forward. We do have the right as a school district to do that, require any new staff members being hired to go for drug tests. The rub is with the new marijuana laws coming out, so we've asked Mr. Zittimer to look into that. Some language, it would just be an amendment to one of our current policies. So we asked him for more information on what that would look like. We'll come back to the board with more information on that. And Ms. Cohen touched base with a little more detail about it. Policy 9200, it's community and family relations. There would be an amendment extended to teachers and all faculty. Within 24 hours, they'd be required. We already have a policy that administrators have to require to families, to parents who email them within 24 hours. We'd extend that to all faculty and staff. All grades need to be entered into real time within 4 school days, excluding weekends and holidays. And within 3 days, a student who's failed a summative assessment can reach out to the teacher and ask to retake that assessment. We're also looking at all kids' personalized learning plans will be done by October 1st of the school year coming forward. And there's also a policy on a follow-up document about conferences that teachers have with parents, almost to hold the parents accountable as well, so the teachers can write in that form what was discussed, a plan that's going to be put in place. So teachers are going to be responsible for X, Y, and Z, parent will be responsible for X, Y, Z, and then the teacher can always bring that form back up to review with the parent when the parent has questions. And lastly, there is a discussion of a policy on lesson plans. It is recommended by CUSAC that we do have that policy. So again, these are all things that Dr. Zawicki is exploring, and we should have more information at the next board meeting. It may come up, some of them, for the first reading, especially the ones that are amendments, and we can discuss that. These do require 2 readings, so it's not if they're on the agenda for the first reading at the next board meeting, they go into practice. All these require 2 board readings, so some of these may be on for discussion and board discussion at our next board meeting. Did I miss anything, Mr. Stevens?
I didn't see anything that you missed. You did hit everything.
Super, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none? Board Subcommittee Liaison Reports. Does anyone have anything to report? CPAG is meeting tomorrow night. And then, anyone else? Dr. G? Anything?
No, sir.
All righty. Parent-Teacher Association Reports. Anyone?
CMS is tomorrow.
Yes, Sand Shores is tonight, so I couldn't make that. No one really can make that. All right, moving right along. Board President's Reports, one of my favorite things to do. So it's with great pleasure on behalf of the Board of Education, I'd like to acknowledge the service that this person put into the Board of Education. Although for a short time, she made a very powerful impact, and she was a breath of fresh air to the board, and we're so happy that she sat on the board, that she came and wanted to be on the board and be active in her community. She's a fellow educator, and I can speak for all the board that we do hope that you do run in this election coming up. And I'd like to thank you for your service, Ms. Jen Aquino. It was a great pleasure to work with you, and I'm glad that we created a friendship out of it. So on behalf of the board, I'd like to present you with this plaque for your dedication.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that my husband and mother would love the breath of fresh air comment. That would go far in my house, but I appreciate this very much. That was very kind of all of you to really welcome me just for the short amount of time I was here. I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your busy meeting to really acknowledge me. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much, and I do hope I see you again. Thank you.
All right. Public comments on action items. 6.1, members of the community may comment on any action item prior to board discussion. Please state your name and address for the board. All comments must be respectfully presented. Abusive or obscene comments will not be tolerated. On action items and action items only, come up, state your name and address for the record, and you may speak at the podium or at the speaker. Seeing none, close the public comment, Lynn, and we did not receive any online emails, correct?
No, we did not.
Super. Approval of monthly expenditures and reports, Ms. Weimat.
Let's see. I make a motion for the approval of the monthly expenditures and reports 7.1 through 7.4.
Second. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Lynn?
Mrs. Weimet?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Zire?
Yes.
Mrs. Cohen?
Yes.
Dr. Gales?
Yes.
Mr. Kemna?
Yes.
Dr. Giordano?
Yes. Personnel action items. Before we
Yeah.
go, Ms. Cohen, I'd like to have
Yeah.
Mr. Zimmer explain.
Sure. Ms. Cohen read action item 8.1.3, which is not on the agenda that she previously read. I just wanted to explain what that is. 8.1.3 on the agenda is the ratification of the suspension of Megan Troop. Ms. Troop was provided with a Rice notice for this meeting, and she asked that the discussion take place in public. Therefore, she's waived her privacy rights by her own choice. Here's what the resolution involves. During the discovery in one of our current litigation matters, we were provided with an audio recording of a conversation that Ms. Troop had with a plaintiff parent, which appears to have been recorded without Ms. Troop's knowledge. In that conversation, Ms. Troop appears to be conspiring with the parent and offering to assist the parent in the parent's potential lawsuit against the Mount Olive School District. If this is true, it raises very serious legal and ethical concerns. We are still investigating the matter, but believe it is prudent to continue Ms. Troop's suspension during the pendency of the investigation. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Dr. Giordano.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Ms. Cohen, would you please move personnel action items?
Sure. Motion to approve upon the recommendation of the superintendent, personnel action items 8.1 through 8.13.
Second.
Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Lynn?
Mrs. Cohen?
Yes.
Dr. Gales?
Yes.
Mr. Kemna?
Yes.
Mrs. Weimet?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Abstain on 8.13, Yes on the rest.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Zire?
Yes.
Dr. Giordano?
Yes. Curriculum and technology action items. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you. On the recommendation of the superintendent, I make a motion to move action items 9.1 to 9.5.
Second.
Question or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call in.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Zire?
Yes.
Mrs. Cohen?
Yes.
Dr. Gales?
Yes.
Mr. Kemna?
Yes.
Mrs. Wimet?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Giordano?
Yes. Finance and operation action items. Mr. Kemna.
On the recommendation of the superintendent, move finance and operation action items 10.1 to 10.5.
Second.
Oh.
Ooh, tie.
Question or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call in.
Mr. Kemna?
Yes.
Mrs. Wimet?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Zire?
Yes.
Mrs. Cohen?
Yes.
Dr. Gales?
Yes.
And Dr. Giordano?
Yes. Administrative action items. Dr. Gills.
I make a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent to move administrative action items 11.1 to 11.13.
Second.
Question or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call in.
Dr. Gales?
Yes.
Mr. Kemna?
Yes.
Mrs. Wimet?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Zire?
Yes.
Mrs. Cohen?
Yes.
Dr. Giordano?
Yes. Old business from the board.
Yes, Dr. Giordano.
Yes, Dr. G.
Have we gotten any progress or made any progress on the board retreat?
It seems at this point, it doesn't seem as the board is fully interested in doing a retreat from the feedback I've received.
Okay, I will say that that's interesting, that board members don't feel it necessary to have a retreat. I remember a couple of years ago, there was clamoring for a retreat, but to each his own. I think that's interesting.
Do we know who doesn't want the retreat?
Well, I received 4 responses on here from any other board member.
Was there a reason for not wanting the
They-
retreat?
They didn't give me an indication as to why.
You know, this is an opportunity to learn how to be a better board member and how to do it correctly to remain a high-functioning board. And I just find it interesting that no one, other than maybe myself and maybe one other person, wants a retreat.
Yeah, I don't know what to say.
Okay, but thanks for putting it forward.
Absolutely. Anyone else? New business. No. Public comments. 14.1, students, parents, employees, and community members may comment on any item of interest pertaining to the Malif School District. Again, please state your name and address at the microphone. For the record, all comments must be respectfully presented. Abusive or obscene comments will not be tolerated.
Brianne Jarvis, 54 Deer Path Drive, Flanders. I'm a little upset coming here tonight. First, I want to say, when I send in questions because I can't be here, I would appreciate, Mr. Giordano, if you read them and if they were answered. I don't want you to shoot me a quick email saying, oh, it's in the presentation. The questions were not all answered in the presentation, and the questions are dismissed, and it was kind of ridiculous. So I was literally going to come here and give a whole speech about how upset I was and my reasons for being here, and I realized, you know, it doesn't matter. You can't even look up from your paper. Can you pay attention to what I'm saying? It's
Excuse
really
me, Ms.
frustrating.
Jarvis, it's Dr. Giordano, and I was writing down your notes to make sure I take the copious notes of any questions you're asking.
Okay, I feel like nobody's listening, and I need you guys to please pay attention to me tonight. It's important to me. First, I would like to say thank you for putting the wipes in the classroom. Unfortunately, in some of the rooms in the middle school, they're on the teacher's desk or behind the teacher's desks, My kids are uncomfortable asking for them. I'm like, you've been cleaning your desks, right? They're like, well, I can't get to the wipes, or I have to ask for them. And I'm sure they're there for them to use, but I think that it would be helpful if teachers could say, these are here for you, help yourself to clean your own desk. Second, I know I typed this in to your parent university, and you said that it was my daughter's perception, but the lunchroom's full for 6th grade lunch. The hallway, out in the hallway is full, leading to the gym is full. We're doubling the students. I understand cohort B is maybe not as big as cohort A, but there's going to be a lot more students in the building. I would like to know how you're going to accommodate for them. Either you're going to have them seated in additional seats, or they're going to be closer together, and I would like to know how you plan to accommodate.
So I had stated this multiple times, and in my last email to you, when I said, here's the presentation, please, it actually says, please reach out to me with any further questions, and I'll respond
Yeah, but this
immediately.
is public information. I
That's
don't want to
fine,
have a
and I'm
private
ha-
conversation.
and I'm
This is for all
happy to
parents.
answer, and I,
Ma'am, this is not a debate. This is not a debate. If you're going to ask a question, at least give the superintendent an opportunity to answer it, please. As
Sure.
Dr. Giordano
Right.
read the statement at the beginning of the meeting, this is not an opportunity for members of the public to be abusive
I'm
to the
not being
board or the
abusive.
administration.
That's insane. I'm not being abusive.
You're being disrespectful and you're interrupting, so please let him finish his answer.
Wow, okay.
So, as I've discussed in the 5 parent universities and over the past 2 weeks, there will be times where the students are less than 6 feet, and then we're also going to be expanding where they're out throughout the building. We have other tables, they're going to be in hallways, going to be all over the place. But where any place that they're less than 6 feet, they will be the plastic barriers. And even when they are at 6 feet, there will be plastic barriers. So if students are 5 feet apart and they have plastic barriers, that is an absolute reality, and I've been completely honest with parents
In
about that.
terms of lunch, they'll be less than 6
Yes,
feet?
in terms of lunch, they may be less than 6 feet apart.
What percentage of the time do you said when practicable, but like, do you think they'll be safely socially distanced 90%, 80%?
I do believe that they'll be safely socially distanced because it's as practicable. I also think that guidance is going to be shifting in the near future. Massachusetts has gone to 3 feet. The research that they have done shows that, in over 300 school districts, that there's no difference between 3 feet versus 6 feet, which is, what CHOP said, and also Chan at Harvard said the same thing.
Okay, well-
So we're making every effort for 6 feet. We're putting in tables all over the building. Depending upon how many kids come in that day, I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but our target is always 6 feet. But if we can't, we have the other mitigation measures in place.
So where else will they be eating lunch?
There's going to be tables here all throughout. You can contact Mr. Kramer, and he can tell you exactly where it's going to be. I'm doing a walkthrough on Thursday. We're doing a mock-up of what it's going to look like on the 22nd, so we can see exactly where the tables are. We also just sent out another request form to see how many kids want to come back. So depending on how many kids are coming back, that's going to determine how many tables. We don't have all that data yet. But based upon the 2 cohorts that are coming back on the 22nd, I'm going to see that on Thursday, and the principals have been working on that, and we are adding extra tables throughout all the buildings.
So I understand you will not be moving them to 3 feet apart unless the CDC guidelines change.
It's not the CDC, it's the New Jersey Department of Health. And so the consistent guidance since June in the road back, in the executive order of Governor Murphy twice, and also in the most recent DOH guidance, as well in the CDC guidance, is 6 feet as practicable. So in order to have lunch, if we can't be at 6 feet, but then we can do another measure, such as mitigation measure, such as the plexiglass barriers, that is permitted.
Okay. So if my student is going to be placed 6 feet or 3 feet within another student, am I going to be notified of that? Am I just winging it when I send my student to school, hoping they'll be 6 feet? Do I have a say? Can I call the principal and say, no, my student needs to be 6 feet from other students?
So if you have a concern about that, I would direct you to your principal. So once again, we're going to try for 6 feet, and we're using the plexiglass barriers even when we are 6 feet. And when we can't be, we have that mitigation
Right,
piece and process. So
I
if you
guess
have-
as a parent, it's frustrating because when practicable is so vague, it could literally be like, well, it wasn't practicable today, so you were sitting right next to another student with no mask on, eating lunch. Like, I need confidence that like care and consideration is going into all of these decisions. And it's just, everything is so vague, and my daughter's like upset. I'm not saying this for me. My kids come to me, and I'm like, no, you're safe. You're not going to die at school today. It's okay. And then they're like, well, Mom, some kids do get sick. And I'm the one saying, you're going to be safe today. And then I'm sending them to the building, and I don't even know. I don't know what's happening.
So as a parent and an educator, I understand viscerally what you're saying. And so we can only do the best we can with the risk mitigation protocols that we have in place that have been approved by the Department of Health and the New Jersey Department of Education. So I think what you're asking for, you can reach out to the principal, and maybe, we are going to have assigned seats, so he can maybe try and talk to you about where your child is seated and give you that information. But exactly what you said, it is vague because it depends upon how many kids come to school on any given day. It depends upon the size of the cohort. So what we're doing is we're shooting for 6 feet. We have the mitigation barriers in place, and that is the best we can do right now. Folks have the choice to remain in the all-remote cohort.
Right, but that's not an option for me. So my kids need to be in school. So just saying, well, if you're not comfortable with it, keep them home, like, that's not an option for me either. On another note, I have a final question that some parents have brought to my attention that, so I'm going to ask it just because it's a rumor going around. I'd like to know the answer, and I did hear you, Mr. Gales, mention this actually. So do you plan on changing the grading in the middle school and high school to standards-based gradings?
So we had standards-based grading during the pandemic closure, and we decided to go back to our regular grading systems. As I reported in Curriculum and Technology and put in my superintendent's report from 2 weeks ago, I did have a conversation with the faculties, both the middle school and the high school, that there's a couple things that I think we need to do. Number one, we need to look at the larger trend of what is going on with colleges and universities and what they're looking for in a GPA. Currently, we provide an A to F grading system with grades that are assigned 0 to 100, and then they're converted to a 4 or a 5.0 GPA. The colleges then extract all that weighting and then provide their own GPA, essentially, for our kids. In that conversion process, what happens is you can lose, on average, about 2/10 of your GPA in a 4.0 GPA. So it's my obligation to make sure that our kids have the best advantage. So if you were to know that we had a grading system that when the colleges disaggregate it, that your 3.0 goes to a 2.8, I think that's something parents would want to know. So we have exploratory committees looking at what is the best grading system to give our kids the best advantage. Number two, how to report data to parents that is meaningful. Currently, right now, 6 through 12, if a kid gets a C, it's not telling parents what substandards or standards the student needs growth in. So to your point, will there be a GPA? Absolutely. Could it be replaced by the A to F system, moving to a more standards-based progression? Absolutely, but it's going to be at least a year exploratory committee, multiple committees to look at this. But I think the thing, first and foremost, to make our kids most competitive, communicate to parents exactly where we're at. And then the other thing is we have kids who are rising from the elementaries into the middle school, and I get questions from parents, why are we not doing standards-based grading in the middle school if we had it in the elementary grades? And then the other thing, too, the other main component of standards-based grading is that it eliminates the subjectivity that takes place in a lot of arbitrary grading. So right now, we're not requiring every teacher to use the same rubric. So if you are teaching ELA 10 in room 101, you don't necessarily have the exact same rubric that's approved by the district, that's standards-based. And then the teacher who's in room 102 is using a different rubric. So the idea in standards-based grading is that for our required courses, there are common rubrics so that everyone is being graded in the same fashion without the subjectivity that currently goes on.
Okay, but you could just give them the same curriculum for both classes. I'm not okay with standard-based grading in middle or high school. I think that is a big mistake. We dealt with it in elementary school. I didn't like it in elementary school. I didn't even look at the report cards. I didn't understand them. One report card came home and I had to call the teacher, and she had to completely redo the entire report card because every grade she was meet standards yet taking advanced level classes, which doesn't make sense.
Hence the need for the rubrics. And so it's going to be part of a larger discussion. The students, most importantly, the students still get a GPA, they're still getting graded, but right now that conversion from the 100-point scale to what we actually have is a 5.0 GPA, believe it or not, in there, things are getting lost, and it's putting our kids at a disadvantage.
Okay,
So-
how many other schools in the state are doing this?
There's a lot of schools who have moved towards it or are in the process of moving towards it because the colleges are asking for it. And it's called mastery-based grading. It's very different than K to 5. When you look at in Virginia and in Maryland, you look at in Northern California and Washington State, there's a movement towards this. And the colleges are moving more and more towards this as they're moving away from standardized assessments such as the ACT and the SAT. So it's not something we're doing today. It's the idea that we're going to have at least a year-long exploration on this. But as the high-performing district that we are, who's committed to innovation, and every single one of these board members here has a track record of being committed to innovation. If we're sitting here 3 or 4 years from now and we find out our kids are not getting into college because we didn't make the adjustment, that's why we're having the conversation right now. And we're not making any twitchy moves. We're not doing anything immediately. It's the idea that we're going to have an exploratory committee that starts next September to have this conversation.
Okay, well, as a parent of very high earning kids, they're very smart, straight A students, I think that may be great if you have lower grades to get an MS, but a student earning 100 should not be getting an MS the same as a student earning an 80 or 90. It's ridiculous. So I thank you for the information. I will take it into consideration. Have a good night. Thanks for listening to me. I did not mean to be disrespectful. I'm coming from a place of caring about my kids and feeling a lot of times like I come here and I don't feel heard and I get half answers. So please, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I need to be heard.
Thank you. Anyone else? Closing the public comment, Lynn? Board comments, Mr. Zire?
Yes, I would like to thank Mrs. Jarvis for coming up. As a parent of students in the school system, I too have concerns, and I have a lot of people come and ask me questions. Of course, I am on the board now, but I direct them to Dr. Zawicki. Dr. Zawicki is very approachable. I do ask that you reach out to him. I understand that it can be considered a private conversation. We do want to get things out in public record, and I think we do communicate a lot to help to get that out there. And the discussion is a discussion now. As a school that is very successful and thinking out of the box, both on remediation and enrichment, we consistently, as educators and administrators, we look to create a better school system to make sure that our students are prepared for everything for college, career, and we are going to always evaluate what we're doing. It's like any job or any kind of profession, you're always consistently evaluating what you're doing. So it can be very easy to get into the rumor mill and be concerned. What I would definitely say is educate yourself. There's a lot of great videos out there about standards-based grading. And I think definitely come, like Mrs. Jarvis did, do voice your concerns. Make your opinions aware to all of us, including Dr. Zawicki. But we are in one of probably the best school districts around. And I wanted to actually, my big thing what I was going to say is that my daughters are taking the NJIT. And it is so exceptional that the fact that, that we both look to remediate, what Mrs. Schlier brought up to the table today, and we also look to enrich. And we're burning the candle at both ends, and we're trying to make our students, our children, as safe and as educated as possible. And I do see the safety concerns. As a teacher, I've already been quarantined twice, and there is always a risk. And unfortunately, as a parent, you have to make the best decision with the parameters that are out there. But I do assure you that I know staff, we could kind of come in and be the first, and that makes like kind of a great tweet. But the truth of the matter is the staff is there to care about you, because when we look at stats, we think of kids not as like numbers. We think of them as like little Bobby that has a game who wants to see his grandmother. All right? So as a teacher, I know that that is our top concern, because we don't look at students or children as stats. We do look at them as individuals. And we are doing everything we possibly can to make this a safe and academically enriching environment. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Zire. Mr. Robinson.
All I have to say is that I just got my second vaccine shot, and I'm very happy about that. But I would suggest everybody else as soon as possible to get it, because for one thing, I think everybody wants to get rid of their masks as soon as possible, and I think it's really the safest way to go. I mean, you can say all you want about it, the anti-vaxxers and everything, but in the end, it doesn't help anybody if they keep spreading it or someone else spreads it. So please stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Weimat.
First, I wanted to note that today is International Women's Day. I just wanted to give a thank you to all our staff who guide and inspire our future leaders. Thank you, Ms. Jarvis, for coming forward. It's always a little intimidating and daunting to try and come up and voice, and we understand. You're concerned. We have children ourselves. We understand what it is. So thank you for coming forward. We do appreciate you coming forward and giving your thoughts to us. Thank you to Ms. Schleer for getting that 80-slide presentation into Cliff Notes, which I appreciated, and looking through, and then reading that quick little thing at the bottom, but it was very nice what you gave here today. Thank you for all your work that you did. And please, everyone, continue to stay safe.
Dr. Gales.
Thank you. I also want to wish a happy International Women's Day to the incredible ladies who are sitting at this dais, as well as to the amazing women who are in our audience, both in person and virtually. We appreciate you not only today, but every day. I want to thank some folks at CMS and Mountain View, Mrs. Fee Bell at CMS, Mrs. Cipolla and Mrs. Marvin at Mountain View, and their students for inviting me to read a Dr. Seuss classic, Green Eggs and Ham, last week at Read Across America. I know there's been a lot of controversy about Dr. Seuss, but we won't get into that here. And even though she's gone, I wanted to recognize Janet Aquino for the work that she put in as a board member. And she was a refreshing spark, especially the day that we went out, and I took out my phone and she says, you know, that is the iPhone version of the flip phone, because I still have a 5S. So I knew that she was going to be a wonderful addition to the board. And lastly, I just want to say that this whole idea of a board retreat, I will say that since school boards will come out for free, those of us who want to do it, I think that we should try to find some topics of interest and meet. If it's not a majority of the board, we don't have to advertise it as an open public meeting, and we should find some topics that will help us become better board members, a more cohesive group, and hopefully those who don't find it of interest will change their minds and join us. That's it. Thank you.
No problem. Mr. Stevens.
I have no comment at this time. My technology's acting up, so I'm like in and out with this.
Okay. So, I couldn't hear you, Mr. Stevens. Oh, thank you. Okay, I couldn't hear you. I apologize. Mr. Kemna.
Again, thank you to Ms. Aquino for her service, and everybody be safe.
Thank you. Ms. Cohen.
I also had the pleasure of reading to a kindergarten class, Miss Danis's class. I believe they're at Sandshore. Late last week, we did Froggy Goes to the Library, and we talked all about them visiting me at the library. They were actually all at home. Her class was all virtual, so it was interesting to see how they all, the kindergarten class, how they behave at home. It's pretty interesting. Some of the parents joined in, so it was actually a really fun time. And I also appreciate your comments. My kids are in college, and I guess sometimes you lose the understanding of what's going on here in terms of how safe everybody is. It's unfortunately out of sight, out of mind in my home, because my kids are far away dealing with the situation, and everything is online for them. So I appreciate your comments, and you know, it's a challenge. There's just nothing you can say about this entire situation, except that, thank God, it seems to be getting better now that, you know, a lot of us are getting vaccinated and we are more understanding of this entire situation. So thank you to Dr. Zawicki for working this situation and all the administrators, and hopefully everything goes well as we move into the soon-to-be cohort IP and the new way. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. I'd just like to thank Dr. Zawicki, Ms. Schlier, Ms. Marcus for coming forward to the policy committee with some ideas for those new policies and amendments to those policies. I think it's long overdue. Personal experience, it is a concern, and talking to a lot of constituents and people I talk to, it has been a concern for some time, and I just think it'll alleviate some of the communication issues we seem to have in our district. So I appreciate all that. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned. Thank you for coming out, everyone.